Okay, everybody, we're just going to get streaming and then we'll get started. Okay, thanks, Lauren. All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our special planning committee meeting, June 21st I'm calling this to order at 9 a.m. I am verbally confirming that we do have quorum. Councillor Mazan sends her regrets, and I don't believe we have Councillor Nishikawa yet, but I'm sure she'll be in shortly. I'm also confirming our senior staff. Our CAO has said that he may be a little bit later coming in here, but he will be here. And we have the rest of our senior staff here. And I also welcome again, Mr. McDonald and Mr. Diamond.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Public input has been invited, as always, at planning@muskokalakes.ca. We have had no input since yesterday's meeting. And today's meeting is being live streamed and recorded on the Township of Muskoka Lakes website and YouTube channel. By participating in the open public meeting today, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded and posted online. All right, so any disclosure of pecuniary interest, committee? No? All right, then we will, and there's no supplemental agenda. So we are going to go into our discussions now. As I said yesterday, unless anything gets raised, the assumption is that the new draft is what we're going to go forward with on the various items. So I do have a list of 18 items here. I am going to start from the ones that I think have the less discussion, that go to the most discussion. Not always right on that, but that's what we're going to try to do here. So the first one is estate lots in rural areas, and I believe from the people that I know wanted to raise these, I'm going to ask for comments, and then we'll have our discussion. So Councillor Roberts, I know, and Councillor Jaglowitz, you both have mentioned this. So would you please go ahead?
Frank, would you go first? I've just got to get my notes up here.
Frank, Councillor Jaglowitz.
No, Gord, you can go first. I'm just,
okay, you guys, you're disrupting my efficient meeting.
Well, well, I gave you 8 points there, and you started on my last one, so you kind of threw me off, but that's okay. I guess I'd like to understand what. As I recall our last discussion, we were talking about allowing some modest development. I just trying to understand where the 20 lots came from. And I also thought that the district had kind of a prohibition against that type of sprawl. So I'm just unsure where that came from. So maybe I can turn it back.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes, I can address that. The district official plan does allow area municipalities to consider estate residential development by way of official plan amendment. The district plan also says that rural development should be limited, with the focus of development being in the urban centers, such as Bala and Port Carling. So I put those two things together and came up with the number 20, which seems to be a reasonable sized development that could be considered by way of official plan amendment. If somebody desired more than 20, they would ask for it through the official plan amendment process, and it would be considered, and all criteria would be applied as needed. I should note there hasn't been much estate residential development historically in the township. There have been applications here and there, some of which have not proceeded, others which have, but have not yet fully developed. So I don't anticipate this being a significant form of development going forward. But we thought the opportunity should be provided through the official plan, as it is in the district plan for this type of development. And if somebody wishes to do it, then they just have to apply for it.
So let me go out. So you're saying it would not be as a right; they'll have to actually go through an OPA.
That's correct.
Well, I certainly misunderstood that. Then explain one other thing. So we have, let's take River Road that has 100-foot lots that are not on the water. Not 100-foot lots, 100-acre lots that are not on the water. Are you suggesting then one of those owners would come forward and build like a cul-de-sac in there and and put in like 1 acre lots with their own services? Or are you talking about chopping up the frontage on the road allowance to allow a much shorter frontage? What is the kind of the? And then of course, I know someone that has 5 1 acre lots. 3 of them are what you call back lots. They don't front onto a public road. So you'd be allowing them like a sort of a mini subdivision to go back in there. And is that, yeah.
Well, yes, those are good questions. And I guess there are a variety of ways you can create lots. And the way we're talking about now is estate lots. So estate lots are on its own public road, which is created on a property, and all of the new lots front on that new public road. There may be a remnant lot that stays on the road that already is there, but it's basically, like you say, Councillor, it's a new road with a cul-de-sac, or maybe it loops in and out so that there's 2 entrances to the public road. The type of lot creation you're talking about, where you're chopping up a property into long, narrow pieces on a public road, that's lot creation by consent. That's also permitted, but there are rules around that as well. And if you're looking to create backlots that are on the other side of the waterfront, then there are rules around that as well in the official plan. So those are the 3 basic types of rural lot development that can happen.
So this is like a resident, like a Ripplewood type thing that we have in Port Carling, where it's, I see. So if it is not as a right and requires an OPA, then I probably misunderstood it and probably don't have the objection.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes, I'm going to let Councillor Roberts just go first, if you don't mind. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My thoughts behind this one is that it's good and it's bad. I believe that the casualty of something like this, rural lot estates, will be our open fields, which were formerly farmlands used for agriculture. And I know our agriculture is falling off, but my concern is that. I think we should be, and then in saying this, I understand that our footprint in our urban centers and communities, or urban centers for sure, where we're trying to direct, is small, and development is needed. But I just feel that it's going to be more damage to our character of Muskoka, and it's a hard one. But again, with it being an OPA amendment, then there'll be a lot of discussion. So there'll be a lot of thought that is put forward on this before anything is approved. So those are my thoughts on it. And you'll see that I put a few on the list, and they're basically there as placeholders for discussion. Because I found yesterday's delegations, and the greater majority of delegations yesterday really took some time to think about what they wanted to say and gave justification. And I think rather than just nodding our heads that on these salient points, we should really have one more look at these. So I myself may not have a salient point, but I think we owe it to the people that spent hours coming up with their delegation to do a final or somewhat final discussion on these points. Thank you.
Councillor Hayes.
Thank you. And through you, I would like to see that portion remain in draft 3 as it is. A lot of these larger treks, I know in my area that I'm aware of, are held by heritage families, and they're holding them for the sole purpose of being able to subdivide when their children and grandchildren return to the area that their family has inhabited for generations. And I don't think that having the limit of 20 is onerous. That's not large. So I'd like to see it go to the public the way that it's contained in draft 3.
Thank you. Mayor Hardy.
Thank you very much. Just one question. First of all, as we discuss individual items, can we get a page reference number in the section?
That's
So we're not trying to scroll through and can pull that out of the OPA or OP particular that we're looking at. So that would be appreciated. The other question, I guess, for Ms. McDonald is that I believe we do have the ability right now to create some estate lots currently. The simple one in Port Carling is a state drive, which is, I think, very much created in this similar fashion. So I don't have an issue and a problem. And I think there are some times that larger estate lots versus smaller 30-foot lots and high density. We all heard last week that everyone's opposed to this potential new development by fixtures, and the public don't want to see it, and it's too much and too many. This is a smaller opportunity for potentially some people to have some little larger homes and some property around, which I think is in character and in keeping with that of the traditional Muskoka. So I'm in favor of keeping this in.
Thank you. Councillor Jaglowitz.
Yes, I was just looking for the actual section reference. I couldn't find it either. Could you provide that, please?
Yes, I can. So I'm looking at section H212, and it is K, which basically says estate residential development of 20 lots or less may be considered by way of OPA, with consideration given in particular to section H212A. And then if you go up to the top, you'll see a whole series of criteria that need to be considered when those kinds of applications are submitted. So you have to think about natural and cultural heritage linkages, avoidance of fragmentation of large intact features and natural spaces, protection of areas with resource extraction potential, review of impacts on agriculture, review of impacts on hard and soft surfaces, appropriate access to employment, schools, community facilities, services, and amenities, avoidance of impacts on scenic corridors, and avoidance of natural and human-made hazards. So they have to go through quite a process to justify it, and not all locations may be appropriate after they go through that process.
Could I have a supplementary?
Yes, go ahead.
So then just help me with this. When an OP says that something is not permitted, but it could be permitted under an OPA. I'm not just sure what that means. Does that mean then that the OP, when the applicant comes in and asks for a zoning change, let's say, and an OPA, does that mean it's automatic? Like if those conditions are met, it's automatically granted? Like what's the purpose of having it in the OP that you can do something if you have an OPA? Because you can have an OPA anytime, right? So just trying to understand the distinction and why it's dealt with that way. Thank you.
That's a very good question, and it's a good policy question for us policy guys to answer. So what the official plan is saying is that on a conditional basis, estate residential development is permitted throughout the rural area. The purpose of the official plan amendment itself is to establish the principle of developing the use on a particular property. So there's a overarching permission, if I can put it that way, to develop this kind of use across the township. However, each individual applicant has to make a case for it and satisfy council that the location under application is appropriate, all impacts are being considered, and the design looks the way it should look given all of the factors that have to be thought through. And only if all of those conditions have been met would there be an exception included within the official plan that allows for estate development on that particular property only.
Councillor Jaglowitz, you are muted.
Yeah. So you might just want to consider that legally would hold up. This sounds to me almost like this might be a loophole that someone could drive a truck through. I assume this is in other plans. Is it? Okay. So because someone may look, because I'm looking for the section that says what you just said and I can't find it.
Okay. Right. I wouldn't consider it to be a loophole. It is fairly common for official plans to say certain things can happen subject to going through an official plan amendment process. And to some extent, it elevates the importance of the ask and allows for council to make a determination on the appropriateness of the use. And if the property is not appropriate for any number of reasons, then council's well within its rights to indicate, no, we're not going to support this application. And of course, that person has the right of appeal, and it goes off to a hearing.
But this would give the applicant, if he appeals with OLT, would give him some strength, or her some strength, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yes and no. It really depends on context. And I think Mr. Diamond may have something to add to this, because we've both written very similar policies and dozens of official plans.
Thank you.
If I can just add quickly to it, thanks, Nick. Two things I wanted to say. In the absence of a policy like this, you still require an official plan amendment for a state residential subdivision, but you don't have any policies in the plan under which you're going to review that application. And so this provides you with the policies in the plan under which you would review the application for official plan amendment. I know that Ms. Thompson yesterday suggested that it shouldn't be there, that you should just take it out because it opens the door. But what it does do is provide you with a policy basis to review applications. The second thing I want to say is you currently have two areas in the township already designated as state residential, and we're taking that away. So this policy says, there is a way to go about this, but the two areas that are currently designated state residential will come off the maps.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you. Further to what the mayor had asked, could you please say the page number that you're going to? By the time you're hunting through and listening, it's very, very confusing. So if you'd say the page number, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Frank, do you want to put your hand down, please? So I have to admit, I didn't reference every section and page on this, so it may take us all just a minute or two to get there, but I certainly understand what you're saying. Okay, my sense is that the estate lots in rural areas is okay as it's written in this draft to go out to the public. Can I get an affirmation from the committee on this? Okay, we're good, Mr. McDonald. Okay, the next point I have written down, and this is Councillor Hayes, who I think may like to speak to this, would be the Walker's Point, and it is section H2.4.3. You have to give me a minute to find the page number.
Page 115.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Hayes, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, we had discussions about Walker's Point before. I had asked for 10 changes. I got it down to 3, and I see now that it's going to be handled by a bylaw at a later date. I'm okay with that going to the public like that, but we just may get some feedback. I was hoping to take care of the feedback ahead of time, but I'm okay with it going to the public like that. We'll see what everybody says.
Okay, we'll wait for the feedback. All right, the next one is dark sky lighting, and I don't have any reference number. Councillor Roberts, maybe you do, or Mr. McDonald?
Yeah, I'm just finding that right now.
And if we
Okay,
give,
and I can just grab my notes here.
so if we give a page number, there's a couple pages, because there's the page in the new official plan document, but there's also the page in our agenda package. And I think for most of us, it's easy to find the page in our agenda package, not like the last one was page 115 of the new official plan, but page 378. So just help. I know it's complicated. Anyway, I put that out there to help the world, because anybody who's watching this online, they're also going to reference what's in our agenda package, probably.
Agreed. Councillor Roberts?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. I just want to bring up for discussion the point that was made yesterday on updating the, forget my document in front of me, where is it here? Updating the dark skies L14E to reflect the new dark sky lighting standards. Thoughts on that?
I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what you're actually asking. I know the dark sky lighting bylaw is coming before us in the not too distant future. Is that what you are referring back to?
No, not at all. It was presented by one of the presenters yesterday that the the dark sky lighting policies be updated to reflect the new dark sky lighting standards. Is that a bylaw or an OP item?
Mr. McDonald.
It's a good question. So I was in another council meeting last night, so I did have an opportunity to look up the new dark sky lighting standards in whatever form they're being presented. So all I can tell you is we can look at that and see if there is any need to enhance the policies. We did make some enhancements to the policies based on comments received already. I would note that the OP is a policy document. It's not a standards document. So the OP provides direction, and then bylaws passed by councils then implement that direction and in a much more detailed way. So if there is a plan to come up with a dark sky lighting bylaw, that's probably the best place to put standards. And I'm thinking standards are, intensity of light, the lumens, and all that kind of stuff. That would be in a bylaw as opposed to a policy document. But leave that with us, and Mr. Pink and ourselves will look at that. And if there are any standards we can include, we will.
Okay, Councillor Roberts. Okay, the next I have is sustainable development and climate change, matching intent to policy, and that is L10. I don't have the page reference yet. And Councillor Roberts, you were the one who brought this up. And you are on mute. I don't know if you realize that.
Yeah, I was. Maybe I can try to find my mouse. I can do this quicker, flipping between screens. And so, give me a second here. All right, so climate change, we all are aware, is here. It's not a future thing, it's here now. And yesterday, one of the delegates identified that the OP must be clear on expectations. And I don't have the pages on this, I'm sorry, but section B2C, and I could put it, requires that the implementation of sustainable development practices, the policies in L10 provide a variable direction, L10.1 providing general and specific direction, and L10.3, 10.4, L10.4, and 10.5 contain much less specific wording, such as encourage, consider, and may. So the gist of that delegation was that we've got to be clear throughout the document what can be done to make this clearer.
Okay, page 458 is the general area we're talking about here. Mr. McDonald, would you care to respond to that?
Certainly. So let me unpack this section a little bit, and then we can talk about how it can be strengthened. So section L10, and I'm looking at another screen, so bear with me, deals with promoting sustainable development and healthy communities, and it has a whole series of general policies that speak to the intent of the township in terms of what it's going to be doing when it reviews development applications, when it prepares its own master plans, and so on. And basically, it opens the door for the township to consider doing a number of things, but it doesn't tie the township's hands, if I can put it that way. So, for example, health impact assessments. And so this particular section says that a health impact assessment may be required to support a development application, but it's a may, and so it's discretionary, and it's not something that would be required every time, but could be asked for. And the reason why it's discretionary is because it probably would only be asked for in an urban context and not in all contexts, because the variables are different, the context is different, and so on. There's another section here that talks about performance checklists, and it goes on to say the township shall consider the adoption of a set of performance measures to guide and monitor development approvals in accordance with this plan. So again, it's an optional thing for the township to consider in developing. And I can tell you a number of larger municipalities with perhaps more resources have developed these kinds of performance checklists, and they create these checklists and ask developers to satisfy these checklists when they're making applications to prove that they're doing all that they can to be as sustainable as possible. So that's something the township could consider. The next section deals with green development standards. So again, this is an optional item for the township to consider. Some municipalities have developed green development standards. They're a process in of themselves in developing these standards. Requires a lot of discussion with landowners and developers to get their buy-in, and it's something the township could consider developing. Again, all of these things take resources, time, and money. So the way they've been included in here is that these are things the township can consider moving forward. We've got another section that talks about sustainable design and development, and it identifies a number of things that can be considered by the township in looking at development applications. So, for example, building orientation should be maximized to should be such that it maximizes passive solar gain. Interior and exterior building materials should be sourced from renewable, sustainable sources, and it just identifies a number of nice to have. It would be great if ideas in this section as well. But again, they're optional, and we're encouraging developers and builders to do these things. So that's how the section's being written. There's nothing like that in your existing official plan. So this is all brand new. And if these things were implemented, there would be new standards and new guidelines established by the township to implement these through the development approval process. While you do have a lot of development, you don't have a lot of large scale development. And that's where usually these kinds of things are applied to. They're not typically applied to consents and minor variances and rezonings, maybe to site plan approvals, but they're really intended to apply to large urban type development where you have the ability to do a lot of things on a property and achieve a number of objectives. So that's why it's written the way it's written. If there's a desire, for example, that you tell me as a council that you really want development standards and green development standards, then we can make it a shall, and then you're on the hook as a municipality to preparing green development standards. But I don't think we ever really had that conversation to talk about whether these things are things that you desire. We're really just opening the door for the township to consider these in the future.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zavitz.
Well, thank you. And through you. Yes, Nick, let's have that discussion right now. Huge topic. I'll tell you that my first thought is how do you and your group see us as a township interfacing under the umbrella of the District of Muskoka, who have their own initiatives, obviously to the benefit of all of us. How does that interplay with this discussion here in terms of the specifics of our township vis-a-vis how we interplay with that larger mothership, if you will? And how does that get infused in this document?
That's a good question. The District of Muskoka has has very similar policies in their official plan as well. And I'm not aware whether they've developed their own green development standards, for example. Typically, that's what local municipalities do. The mothership, so to speak, provides direction, and it's up to the area municipalities to take that direction and make it work for their township. So if there's a desire to develop green development standards and apply them in the township of Muskoka Lakes, then that's something that you should definitely be considering if you're interested.
Follow up, Councillor Zavitz. You're on mute, Glenn.
There we go. There we go. Sorry. Thank you. And to your point, the one thing that I am very concerned about, and I hear it time and time and time again over this last session or sessions, is we'll need to look at that at budget time. We'll need to look at that at budget time. Our last budget is very rare, very right in my mind still, and we ran out of money long before we ran out of things we wanted to use it for. So as this is such a weighty issue, climate change, were we to adapt standards, I think we need to be really, really careful of what, are we going to be getting Tesla pickup trucks, et cetera, which we could ill afford. I think this is a big discussion that we should be having. If it's here and now, fine, but I think we should be very careful and tread lightly, be very considerate of of the pros and cons of where we're going with this. So just a cautionary note, I guess, more than anything. Thanks.
Okay, so before I get back to you, Councillor Roberts, I just want to clarify for my own sake. Mr. McDonald, I think what you're saying is it's in here and then council can, to Councillor Zavet's point, have that very detailed discussion and put those in place should we want to, and then we can refer back to the OP that as our strength for putting those in place. Have I got that right?
That's absolutely correct. It's very similar to another policy we have in here about community planning permits. We're not saying it's something you should do, but it's something that if you want to do, there's a policy in here that enables it to some extent, even though it's not required, but it's in there. And we have a policy in here about short-term rentals, for example. It says the township may consider implementing a licensing regime, but it's not something we're making a decision on in the official plan. So we've got a few of those things in here that open the door for a future conversation, Chair Bridgman. So I think that's a great, an accurate reflection of what we're trying to do here.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. Just a follow-up. Mr. McDonald, I'm supportive of what's written there now that with your explanations. And it really is a catch-22 situation. Everyone around this room wants to do this, but as with all the other strategic plans, master plans, and that we have done this year, they're all going to cost money. And that's going to be a big discussion, as Councillor Zavet was saying, at budget time, because we quickly run out of money. And I think that perhaps this is more a district conversation, that we all don't have to reinvent the wheel. Each township, and that goes for short-term rentals. And I'm thinking that future councils should come together and try to basically get the district to take on a more of a leadership role in some of these hard nuts to crack, which I guess they're trying to do with the climate change, the CAO Climate Change Committee. So thank you for that explanation, and it's not an easy one.
Mayor Harding.
Thank you. I think I confirm with everybody, we're moving in the right direction. We've had nothing in the official plan. This planet is 4 billion years old, and we're not going to solve climate change in the next 30 days or in the next 3 years, but we're certainly moving in the right direction with these policies to start to change the trajectory. And I think that's the most important part. So I'm certainly happy with the language.
Okay, my sense is we have a consensus here that this language is fine and it goes out to the public as is. Okay, everybody's good with that. All right, Mr. McDonald, that's good. Environmental and natural heritage policies, and Councillor Roberts, you're up again. And again, I don't have a reference page. I'm sorry. You're on mute, Gord.
I guess, sorry about that. Thank you again. Was I the only one to send in agenda items?
Well, you certainly had the longest list.
Well, I guess, okay. And again, why I'm doing this is I think we really got some good input, and I apologize to the other delegates that I didn't include in my list, but they're going to have ample opportunities again during the public meetings to bring up these. So going to my synopsis and notes here is that one of the delegates talked about that committee is asked to amend and expand the definition of natural heritage features and areas to include forest areas and remove the word coastal from our wetlands to reflect the importance of all wetlands to protect the hydraulic and biological functions. And can you have a comment, Mr. McDonald, on whether this is possible?
Mr. McDonald?
Yes, I certainly listened to that submission and deputation yesterday. The definition we have in the official plan comes directly from the provincial policy statement, where there is a definition of natural heritage features and areas. I get where the deputant is going in terms of wanting to ensure that all natural features are somehow considered. I think they already are in the official plan, and we'll look to strengthen the language wherever we possibly can. I think the deputant also made the point that it isn't only significant features that are to be protected, other features should be protected as well. That's a broader discussion. And just so you understand what I mean by that, is significant is also a defined term as well. So significant wetlands are provincially significant wetlands, for example, and those that are not significant as defined are other wetlands. And this official plan protects both types of wetlands. In one case, it says no development or site alteration is permitted. And in the other case, it basically says no development or site alteration is permitted unless you can demonstrate no negative impact. I think where the deputant is going as well is that all forests should be considered a natural heritage feature and area. And in my view, it is, but they're not considered to be significant. So the no negative impact test does not apply to woodland areas. And that's something that the provincial policy statement also doesn't do either. So we've tried to reflect provincial policy where we can. They are minimum standards. I would note that one of the key policies in here relates to the township as a future to-do item, requiring budget, of course, to prepare a natural heritage system plan. And that's in your official plan. And we've had many conversations about that. And I'm thinking that through the development of a natural heritage system plan for the township, that the broader discussions be held on exactly what features are very important and should be protected and whether they should be mapped. And in that regard, I'm thinking about forested areas and other areas which we have not mapped, obviously, in this official plan. So I think there's a bit of some of this discussion will need to be had through a future process. But in terms of making any changes to the plan to reflect the direction that was requested, we can look at that. Obviously, just got the deputation yesterday, so I haven't really turned my mind to what that is going to look like, but our minds are open to it.
Mr. I'm going to let, can I let Mr. Diamond just comment, Councillor Roberts? Mr. Diamond?
I don't want to reiterate what Nick said, but if you read through the entire plan, wetlands, all wetlands are protected. They're just not identified as significant natural features. But in Muskoka, the district of Muskoka is 90% forested. And so it's not like Southern Ontario, where if you're 2 hectares of forest, you're protected. I think what Nick said about in the future looking at old growth forest, maybe something of greater significance in Muskoka, but I've been to a number of hearings in Muskoka and dealing with this matter, and it's clear that neither the provincial policy statement or the district official plan considers forests to be significant just because you got 90% of the municipality or the district is forest.
Thanks, Jim. You were way much more direct than I was on that answer.
Hey, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. A final word on this. I was encouraged when I read the 134 significant changes to this report that it mentions wetlands, and it mentions that there is a process whereby you follow the process that you can actually have wetlands, what deemed to be an official wetland. And I'm encouraged by this because it gives the small lakes a tool to go out and look at their lakes and follow that formula that is provided by the provincial government to do that. I think of the most threatened lake that we have in Muskoka, Little Long Lake, is only in existence because of a wetland. That wetland disappears, Little Long Lake water disappears. So I would encourage Little Long Lake to actually start that process of declaring that as a significant wetland or whatever. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're good with leaving this as it is, committee? Yes? Tim? Yes, okay. The next one is site plan control bylaw, and that's E5, which is page 339, and E4.2.2, Gord, Councillor Roberts.
I asked, there must be other people that will have some comments or suggestions on this. This is not the Gord Roberts show.
Well,
Surely.
it is in the next 4 points, to be honest with you. Okay.
All right. If there is nothing, I'm going to go to my notes. And all right, so we are under, site control. 1 second. And as I look through it, you know, a few hours between meetings to really dig deep into the understanding of this is, I agree with Mr. Sift is pretty challenging, given the amount of emails we did receive yesterday, or I did receive on a few subjects. So site plan control is E5 and E4 2G, and the delegation basically said, we request that the site plan control law be added to E5 to ensure that it is also amended to include the protections in the new OP. There was more in there, but that was the salient point that I pulled at it. And we also request patios to be added to the list of structures that should be considered in the updated bylaws. So I'm throwing that out.
So if I can reply, so there is a site plan control section in the official plan. It's section N5, and that basically sets out what is subject to site plan control within the township. To implement this section and a prior section in your current OP on site plan control, the township actually has a site plan bylaw itself. And that site plan bylaw identifies exactly what is required to be submitted along with the site plan application. I'm going to be asking Mr. Pink in a moment for his thoughts on elevations and when they're required. I think the deputant was requesting that elevations be submitted with site plan control applications, which the Planning Act does allow for. The question I would have is, if elevations are submitted, are they just to understand what is being proposed, or is it for the purposes of having a discussion about what the elevation actually looks like? And if it's the latter, then for the township to have that kind of conversation, then you need to start establishing guidelines that set out exactly what your expectations are in terms of what development should look like. So many communities do that in urban centers. They say, okay, we want articulated building walls on large walls, for example. If you're talking about shoreline areas, that's going to be a huge conversation. I can predict right now if we're looking to establish guidelines for that. So it already sets it up so elevations can be asked for through a site plan process. And I'm going to ask Mr. Pink to explain what the township requires now and whether there's a need to change any of that, and whether as well there's a need to change the site plan bylaw. I think there is, because we're adding new things to the bylaw. For example, new boathouses will require site plan approval, expansions to boathouses, and we're expanding the application of site plan control across the township. So Mr. Pink, any comments?
Mr. Pink.
Thank you, through you, and good morning, committee. Currently, I think as Mr. McDonald stated, the elevation drawings are typically more pertinent in our urban settings and for more commercial development, and where we do have more guidelines now in the CIP, existing policy, and certainly in the current draft is much more detailed. And as you committee will likely recall, during commercial site plan approvals in the urban core area for commercial development, we commonly do discuss and debate the appearance and architecture of buildings through that process. It is not typically required for residential development, single lot residential development along the waterfront currently. I would look to council if that is a type of guideline we want to get into, although that's probably a very large can of worms and a lot of opinions as to tastes and opinions as to what is appropriate style and not. So that I think is a much broader discussion. When it comes to updating the site plan control bylaw, yes, certainly that's been on our list for quite some time, waiting for the official plan review to be adopted to bring that bylaw forward. But keep in mind, it's largely technical in nature. It will outline what areas will be subject to site plan. Currently, only certain zones and certain lakes are. The current draft would subject all waterfront and residential development to that process, so we'll encapsulate more areas. And also the current site plan control bylaw stipulates the scale of development that will trigger the need for an approval. And currently it's somewhat not overly stringent. One must double the footprint of their dwelling in order to trigger that along the waterfront, which in many cases is a significant increase in size. So a lot of redevelopment along our waterfronts do not go through that process. And as we've, I think, discussed several times during this process, the current official plan will look to capture more development. I think we've landed on approximately any 500 square foot addition, boathouse construction, and other matters will trigger site plan approval. So the site plan bylaw will have to be updated to implement those directions.
Mr. Diamond?
Just one quick thing, not so much related to the official plan, but I feel I have to say it. You have had a number of comments from people about how much more work the whole site plan process is going to cause for staff. And I know Mr. Clark has been very vocal about that. You do need to update your site plan control bylaw, and council will need to consider the delegation of site plan control for certain matters to staff so that it's not an onerous process that you're getting 20 site plan applications a month coming to a committee. And I would encourage you strongly, I know it's away from the OP, but I would encourage you strongly to look at the delegation levels to staff so that it can be done in-house, be done quickly, and you have confidence that your staff can make the right decisions on these things. With that, I'll end.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Diamond. Councillor Jaglowitz.
Yes, Chair, I do have a procedural question on the last three items. I had submitted 8 points with you. A lot of our points are overlapping. Are all my points in your list of 18, or have you amalgamated them in, for example, site plan control or site plan control bylaw? I'm not speaking on because I had 2 points that addressed it. Or have you consolidated them all under general topics?
I've consolidated them under general topics. So if I took Gord's list. So please.
So that's why it's the Roberts show. Okay. So
well,
I would then like to go back. If you're not going to deal with my points, I'll either raise them at the end or I'll go back to the ones you've already gone through.
Well, my fault, Councillor Jaglowitz. I guess I made the assumption if I had the heading down there, you would speak to it at the time it was there.
Okay, so how do we address this then? Because we've gone by 3 subjects that I had raised, but I was very specific in my question, not general, like Mr. Roberts was. So do you want me to cover my list at the end, or?
I think we're going to finish with this topic, and then you can go back and tell us what we've already gone by that you want to talk about.
Because my point 3 and 4 were on site plan issues, but it also covered other issues too. So I'm at your discretion here. I'm not trying to hold up the process. That's probably why Mr. Roberts felt he was the only one.
Well, he did have the longest list. If we've got a prize for that, and just kidding, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Jaglowitz, resorts I have amalgamated. I believe you and Peter and Gord all made points on that. I amalgamated topics. So I would like to.
Now I don't know where you've amalgamated them in and where they're separate, because I don't have your list. So do you want me to deal with this subject? I mean, what I don't want to do is pipe in here and then you bring up my topic. How many?
No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going by topics, Councillor Jaglowitz.
Okay.
So if you have,
then I'll speak. Okay. So with your permission,
Yes,
may I?
yes.
Okay. So I raised 2 points that I asked to be discussed. And the first one was that the OP should set standards of use for the 50-foot waterfront buffer.
That's on my list.
No.
Excuse me, that is on my list, Councillor
Okay.
Jackal.
All right, well then I raised the second point, and that was that the OP should protect the 15-foot waterfront ribbon.
That is also on my list because it's different than site plan control.
Okay, well, no, it deals with it. Okay, well then let's, then I'll let you follow.
Let me quickly run through what I'm
Sure.
dealing with so that there's no confusion.
But that's
then.
what, yeah, thank you.
Perhaps that would be helpful. And actually, it's a good point for whatever our next meeting is. We can maybe put up on the screen briefly at the beginning the topics that I have identified so everybody understands. I think that's a really good point. Thank you.
So as long as we get to cover my 8 topics, we've already covered one. Thank you.
Okay, so I will run through them afterwards, but let's just finish this particular topic. Councillor Zavitz.
I don't want it to seem like it is the show of only a few people, and that's, I guess, my larger concern. I almost would want to, and I just heard your words, so I'll back away for now, but I'd almost ask our consultants and our staff, David, at minimum, what they garnered from thus far. Do we really need to go over some of this as we are essentially blessing the document in its 3rd phase? I keep hearing you say that, and I keep going, yes, we are. Yes, we are. I guess subtle nuances, subtle refinements is what we're looking for now. But I just wanted to say that just because I'm a little quiet here doesn't mean that I don't have thoughts and interest in this piece. Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Zavitz, I don't think anything's interpreted that way. It's just specifically these items are ones that people wanted to talk to before blessing the document. Mayor Harding?
Thank you. And I appreciate actually your approach, Chair Bridgman, in the fact that no matter who puts the topic on the table, we're all talking about it, whether one person chimed in on a topic or not. So thank you. And Councillor Roberts, you have the most extensive list. So you're leading the discussion and that's awesome, but we're all chiming in. So we're all going to get there, trying to tick off some boxes where people said we should talk about it and finally bless it. Regarding site plan control, which I think is the topic on the floor at this particular point, my question specifically is, and I realize we're talking about delegating additional stuff to staff, but potentially more to Mr. Pink, because we are, if we do subject all lakes and all waterfront properties to site plan control, I think we do roughly 300, 350 site plans currently a year, or certainly planning applications, we do over 400, but what numbers are we talking about? And truly, how are we going to be staffing internally, whether or not this comes to a committee level or not, and assuming everything's delegated to staff to deal with site plan control, how are we going to manage our way through potentially quadrupling the number of site plans? And what is our time frame? Because it's nice to say it's subject to site plan control. My understanding, especially over the past couple of years, that the average person, even when it's delegated to staff, they're taking 3 to 4 months to get through site plan control. And our staff are already overwhelmed. And if you want to quadruple that, I think we're going to have some other issues and other problems going forward. So, Mr. Pink, maybe, or through you, Madam Chair, that our staff could kind of comment, because this is a bigger change, so to speak, and I don't disagree that many more things should be subject to site plan control, but a blanket everything might be too much.
Mr. Pink?
Thank you. Through you. Just to clarify quickly, the delegation, council many years ago delegated the authority to staff to approve of what's referred to as minor site plans, and that's been implemented as essentially any residential or waterfront residential developments. So staff have been bringing forward commercial or industrial resorts, those types of applications for site plan approval. However, all again, residential site plans have been delegated to staff for some time. You may recall Bill 109 brought a report, I believe in April or May, that did propose to delegate all site plan approvals to staff and actually prohibits councils from approving site plan. And we passed that by law last week. So as of July 1st, council is not actually permitted to approve of any site plans any further. And that bylaw, like I say, was passed last week. When it comes to volumes, we currently, I would say generally over the last 5-10 years, we would average about 100 to perhaps 120 site plans on an annual basis. Since the pandemic has hit, those numbers have increased fairly substantially just due to the increased development activity. And we're probably closer to the 150 range on an annual basis. I don't want to, predict or estimate precisely how much that may increase as a result of the changes. But to put it into perspective, we issue approximately 1,200 building permits per year. Keep in mind that includes a lot of minor dock work, demolitions, septic approvals, interior alterations, which would not be captured. But certainly the potential exists to increase the number of site plans that may have to be approved to potentially in the 300 to 400 range, depending on exactly those values that are put in the official plan. As I say, currently additions exceeding 500 square feet would trigger. I have to go through again the average of the 1,200 building permits per year, how many that captures. Keep in mind again, those building permits capture rural areas, urban areas that would not trigger site plan. So really one would have to go through those, and obviously it changes on an annual basis, but would have to look at how many substantial new residential developments or redevelopments occur along our waterfront. But I'm estimating, again, it would probably increase from about 150 to likely 300 to 400 site plans per year. What I would say in regards to timelines, there was a period, particularly I'm sure councillors will recall, during the pandemic, planning staff underwent a significant changeover. We lost well over 100 years of experience due to retirements, all roughly around the same time, and the volumes increased significantly. I'm pleased to say that council put the resources necessary to supplement current staff. Those new staff are learning the ropes every day and learning by leaps and bounds. And I would say our timelines on site plan approvals have improved considerably over the last few months. I believe we're now closer to the 1 to 2 month range for typical site plan approval. Again, depending on the ultimate policies in the approved official plan. And when we update our site plan control bylaw, if application numbers increase so much that we're not meeting legislated timelines and staff are overwhelmed to produce that number of approve those number of site plans, I will have to bring forward during future budget processes, potentially additional staff to deal with that workload. And I will do that and monitor that as time goes on. Hope that helps clarify and available to answer any follow-up questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pink. All right, so I am, in terms of the site plan control bylaw and building elevation drawings and site plan control, we leave this as is going forward out to the public. Everybody's okay with that? All right. All right. Now we have so let me go through this first, just so you all know. This is my list, and obviously anybody can add anything else onto this. Setbacks on properties in the waterfront area, development of islands less than 0.8 hectares, aggregates, OP policies on 50-foot waterfront buffer and 15-foot ribbon of life buffer, properties that have water frontage on more than one side in terms of front yard setbacks, Leonard Lake, discussion on that, and then there's a whole discussion on resorts on the islands occupancy, the rental program if resorts cease to operate, and some carry forward wording from the old OP, and then a whole discussion on RCC. So that is the list that I did last. I did. Downzoning marinas and boathouses. Sorry. Thank you, David. I did send my list to David this morning, so he knew what was happening here. Councillor Jaglowitz.
Did you just miss recreational use of lower level of boathouses?
I just said boathouses, first floor.
Oh, so you do have that in there.
Oh, no, I do. No, that I, to be quite honest with you, I figured boathouses and RCC are going to be our biggest discussion points, but I might be wrong.
Yes, so thank you. You have covered my issues. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. All right, so the setbacks on properties in the waterfront area, I have listed that. I'm not sure what the discussion is on this. It's E412. So who would like to speak to this? Councillor Jaglowitz.
So does that include the 50-foot buffer and the 15-foot buffers, or are they separate topics? Okay, thank you.
So not to highlight you again, Councillor Roberts, but I believe that this was something that you wanted to speak on. You know, I'm going to suggest we come back to that if you want to talk on it going forward. I can see you.
Yes, please do. I'm trying to find that, as you said. Yeah.
I know you are. So development of lands less than 0.8 hectares, and that's E4.5.3A. So, sorry. Okay, Director Pink. I think Director Pink would like to chime in here.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry if it jumps the gun, but I'm reading Councillor Roberts' request referencing E412, and I think it mirrors the mayor's request to talk about setbacks on properties that front water on 2 locations. I believe they both mirror, so it's actually the items duplicated on our list, if I may. Just to provide a little bit of background on that. Currently, the policies are clear. There is a 20-meter setback from the waterfront, regardless if a property has frontage in 3 or 8 or 2 locations. And our zoning bylaw does the same. It implements a 20-meter setback from the waterfront, again, regardless of the number of frontages ones have. Again, I think this is stemming from one singular rezoning application that was spurred a lot of discussion and debate. Again, the zoning bylaw required setbacks from both water frontage, and setbacks from both water frontages or relief was requested in both instances. So I think the policies are fairly clear here and current zoning provisions, but happy to hear the concerns or discussions.
So, Mr. Pink, just before I open this up, then if everything's clear, then I mean, my understanding is that somebody has to decide what's the water front and what's the water back, because that was the discussion. If you could clarify that.
Thank you. That is correct. So the way the nuances of these are really typically zoning issues. The zoning bylaw works. There is only one front lot line. And the way the zoning bylaw typically reads is that's going to be your longer frontage. Yes, other water frontages may be referred to as a rear lot line. However, there's a general provision in our zoning bylaw that states regardless, there is a 20-meter required setback from all navigable waterways. Now there are, again, the waterfront residential section will have certain grandfathering, as we know, for existing buildings closer than 20 meters. And I think that's where some of the confusion lied. There was grandfathering from one frontage on this particular property. The other frontage did not have any grandfathering because it was considered a rear yard, but the protection was there. There was a 20-meter setback from that frontage. There could be some debate as to which should be the front and which should be the rear, which should have grandfathering and which shouldn't, but those are really more technical zoning details. The official plan is clear. There's a 20-meter setback from navigable waterways, and that again is implemented in our zoning bylaw.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Jaglowitz.
Okay, so I understand what you said, David, but let's get practical for a section. So we have a property, it's on a peninsula, and it faces one direction and not the other. Are you saying then that the ribbon of life, the 15-foot setback applies, the patio, all of those things apply as if there were two front yards? Is that what you're saying? I don't believe that's how we've dealt with it. My recollection is that the owner could kind of argue that his front was something different than what the bylaw said. So I think the purpose of this question is that it should be clear in the OP that it doesn't matter which way your house faces, that if it's the setback from the water should be treated the same as if they were both front yards. Is that the way it is written now?
Okay, Mr. Pink.
Thank you. I'm happy with Mr. McDonald to take a closer look and ensure that that is abundantly clear. I believe it is. Again, I'm not sure where the confusion is or why it was implied as if, again, in this particular property or with a peninsula with two frontages, that there's not a 20-meter setback from both sides. There is. There's a very clear general provision in our zoning bylaw that there is a standard 20-meter setback from all navigable waterways. Again, I think where the confusion lied is, as we all know, in the waterfront area on a typical lot with only one frontage, if you have an existing building or buildings within 20 meters, there are certain grandfathering or redevelopment permissions. As we know, the 20% bigger, 20% higher, up to 35 to 50 feet back, et cetera, et cetera. I think where the confusion lied is that only came into play on this particular property, or a property with two frontages on one side and not the other. But if anything, that becomes more restrictive because the other side just had a blanket 20-meter setback and no grandfathering. So again, I think that's perhaps where some of the confusion lied. I think the policies are clear, but we're happy, again, Mr. McDonald, to take a closer look and ensure that it can't be interpreted that property with multiple water frontages is granted some relief from the shoreline buffer requirements. I don't believe that's the case, but we're certainly happy to make that more clear if needed in the draft.
Follow up, Councillor Jalowitz?
Yeah, just a supplementary then. Yeah, wouldn't it just be clear if the OP just stated that where a property has two water frontages that they both be treated as front yard, just to make it clear. I know you're saying these are in the zoning bylaw, but I have very little confidence in our bylaws, David, and because anybody at any time can challenge a bylaw because the OP is more permissive, and therefore it's my belief that we must toughen our OP. It must be the document we toughen, not the zoning. So if Mr. McDonald or whoever can indicate that both water frontages are being treated the same in the OP, then that satisfies me.
Mr. Diamond.
Yeah, the OP says 15-meter vegetative buffer along the entire frontage adjacent to the water. So I think it's pretty clear. But we can have another look and make sure that it's, belt and suspenders.
All right, Councillor Jaglowitz, are you just looking for some easy language to understand for people looking at it?
That's right, because it gets translated to, can we have a patio? Can we have a gazebo? Like what? Just to make it straightforward. That's all. And if it is, then that's fine. And you could actually point me the section in the OP where it says that. That would be helpful.
Mr. McDonald, what? We just lost. Well, I have the internet. I'm the only one here that has the internet because I'm on a Wi-Fi. Madam Clerk, we are on hold for a minute. Not streaming, so we're not streaming, so we are on hold for a minute. Why don't we take a break? Yes, let's do 10 minutes. We're back at 10:20.
Councillor Kelly.
Hi, Frank. Just to let you know that the outside world is total, it can view everything that we are now currently seeing and hear everything. So just for your information.
I thought the recording had stopped. No?
I don't know because I just got a I just got a text from someone. Maybe.
I got the same notice from Barb.
Yeah.
Chair Bridgman. That we're being live streamed right now. So I guess
we're being live streamed.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Barb.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, perhaps anyone who's watching on the live stream doesn't realize that we're having technical problems.
Yeah.
So now they know. And I'm going back mute and camera off.
Yeah.
I guess I'll follow suit.
I just received an email from the clerk that states it appears Zoom is down. Please come back at 11 a.m. so that we can try again, with the hopes that the Zoom is working at that time. Peter and Gord, I believe you're still on live stream somehow. Please exit and the meeting so that hopefully it shuts down the stream. So anyways, Peter and I are going to get off. And for everyone, I guess, Glenn, you're nodding your head if you hear me.
Yeah.
We're supposed to come back at 11 a.m.
11 o'clock.
Yeah.